Hello, and welcome to the show. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going back to 2004, when the streets were neon lit, the soundtracks were blasting hip hop and rock, and the car culture craze was at its peak. That's right, we're talking about Need for Speed Underground 2, but for the PlayStation 2. This game has a special place in a lot of people's memories, and that's mine included. But is the nostalgia better than the actual game? Let's break it down. Let's do some facts. Let's look at reviews. Let's look at the platform differences. And of course, my own experience. The good, the bad, and the frustration. So frustrating. Now, you're going to need some background and legacy of this game, okay? So, Need for Speed Underground 2 was released on November the 15th, 2004. It is developed by EA Canada and published by Electronic Arts, EA. Okay? It was a direct sequel to the hit Need for Speed Underground. And EA wanted to go bigger, louder, flashier. Which obviously they did. This was one of the first Need for Speed titles to really embrace an open world city, Bayview. It's split into 5 massive districts, not compared to today's, but at the end of the day they were massive, right? Bayview was EA's attempt to capture the street racing culture popularised by the Fast and the Furious. And it gave players freedom to drive around discovering races, shops, and unlock events in a more immersive way than a simple menu system like the previous game. Customization was the big hook. You had an insane amount of options. You got body kits, spoilers, vinyls, decals, paint, as in paint jobs, rims, hydraulics, neon lights, and even the ability to put giant speakers in your trunk. Combine that with hundreds of performance upgrades and you had a game that let you create your dream car. Or possibly a nightmare on wheels, depending on your taste. And I had a few of them. But let's not forget the soundtrack, which you can't hear on my playthrough because of the copyright, but you got Lil Jon, Snoop Dogg, Rise Against, Chingy, and my personal favourite, Static X. This soundtrack screamed mid-2000s. It was aggressive, it was stylish, and it gave the game a distinctive sort of identity. Now, it did have some reception. When Underground 2 dropped, critics loved it. The PS2 version pulled an 82 on Metacritic, with reviewers praising the sheer variety of cars, upgrades, and the size of Bayview. GamePro gave it glowing reviews, calling it an outstanding sequel in all aspects. Game Informer enjoyed it too, though they noted the overworld could be cumbersome. Yeah, and GameSpot, however, was a bit more critical, giving the PS2 version a 7.4 out of 10, saying the open world map and constant driving between events actually got in the way of the action. But do you agree? User reviews though were even kinder. Metacritic's user score sits around at 8.6, 8.7, which shows how much fans embraced the vibe and customization options. So did I. But here's the thing, guys. While it reviewed well back in 2004, playing it today really does expose the cracks. And on my playthrough, you will see those cracks. And my word, there are some. Now, as I told you, I played on PS2. There are platform differences, okay? So, Underground 2 wasn't obviously just on PS2. It also came out on Xbox, GameCube, and PC. and depending on where you played the experience, it could feel different. PS2 had some of the best visual effects, like motion blur and cinematic camera zooms, but then it did struggle with frame rate dips in busy areas, and those motion blurs got frustrating. The Xbox One the game smoother overall, with sharper lighting and textures, although it didn't have some of the flashy visual tricks that the PS2 had. So you had give and take on both games. Now GameCube was the weakest of the bunch. Textures looked muddier, the frame rate drops were more noticeable, and it didn't even support online play. So what can you say about that? But then, of course, the PC version let you crank up the graphics if you had a good rig back in the day. So what did you play on? Let me know in the comments. So anyway, while the PS2 version wasn't technically the best performing, it was the one most people played, and it had that iconic feel thanks to the controller, the online play, and those flashy effects. I recommend you play that version like I did, because it's my nostalgia. So there are some community criticisms. Now, if you ever talk to the Underground 2 fans, one topic always comes up: rubber banding. Fucking rubber banding. Yes, the infamous AI. It doesn't matter if you're perfect in a race, hitting every corner and pulling way ahead. The AI will just magically catch up, or worse, they crash into a wall and somehow slingshot back into first place like nothing has actually happened. It's so frustrating. It feels unfair, and it's one of the most notorious flaws in the game. There's another complaint as well, and that was the traffic. The cars often felt like solid walls. You'd hit them and your momentum would die instantly, while the AI seemed to just shrug it off. Sometimes, traffic even spawned directly in your path, leaving you no chance to avoid it. And then there's the event design. A lot of the people enjoy the variety, but modes like drag racing and Street X were divisive. The drag required quick shifting and lane changes, but the input delay in the handling made it feel unresponsive. Street X, on the other hand, turned tight technical tracks into a rubber banding nightmare. Many players, myself included, dreaded those events, and you will see that on my playthrough, which you can go and see whenever you want. The whole game's on, no loading screens. Now, I'm going to talk to you about my personal experience a bit more, and you got to let me get personal. Let's go back to that rubber banding, right? It sucks. It ruins the feeling of progression in races. No matter how well you drive, you're never safe. I have, however, found a AR code, max cheat card thing, where you can go in and you can take the rubber banding off, and man, it made a difference. I was so lucky I had that in my backup, But let's talk about NPC cars. They feel way too heavy. Colliding with one basically stops you dead, which makes racing traffic more about luck than skill, because they just pop up. It's like a magnet taking you towards that car. Drag racing is just Street X. I hated that. Drag has that awful handling delay where you try to switch lanes and the car reacts about a second or two too late. Street X feels like bumper cars against rubber banding. I dreaded these events every time they popped up until I took the rubber banding off. Another thing that annoyed me were the rain effects. They look cool at first. They did. But the visibility is awful, especially when you're racing. Combine that with the PS2 graphics limitations, and you're basically guessing where the road is, and that's how I felt. And more things I struggled with was the GPS system was a joke. It was clunky, unreliable, and sometimes more of a distraction than a help. It would take you down the wrong way streets, all sorts, right? And honestly, right, while the nostalgia is strong, those nights of blasting through Bayview with a fully decked out ride and that killer soundtrack, the reality is the game doesn't hold up as well as I remembered. Nostalgia was better than the actual gameplay. And it really was. I remembered it being amazing. But it just wasn't that amazing when I played this time around. But let's talk about some of the good stuff. I don't want this to sound like I hated the game, okay? There's a reason we still talk about Underground 2 2 decades later. When it works, it's pure fun. Drifting events, they feel fantastic. Outrun races against random drivers are quite a blast. And I didn't do that until later on in the game. And just cruising around Bayview in a customised ride still feels cool. The customization was unmatched at the time. It let you put your personality into your car in a way few games did. And the vibe, no other Need for Speed game has captured the underground tuner scene quite like this one. And I really think that. I do. I think I'm dead right saying that. So my conclusion. Where does that leave Need for Speed Underground 2 in 2025? It's a flawed classic. The customization, the soundtrack, and the vibe are unforgettable. But the rubber banding, the heavy NPC cars, poor visibility, frustrating race modes drag it down. Playing it now, I realised that nostalgia really carried my memories of the game more than the gameplay itself. It was frustrating, as I said, but still, Underground 2 remains an important part of racing game history. It was ambitious, it was stylish, and it cemented Need for Speed as a cultural icon of the 2000s. Would I recommend going back to it today? If you want a bit of nostalgia, absolutely. If you're looking for refined gameplay, maybe stick with a newer title, unless you get the HD texture pack on the PC. That changes the whole thing up. But that's my review of Need for Speed Underground 2 on the PlayStation 2. Did you love it back in the day? Let me know in the comments. Did the rubber banding drive you crazy as well? Please let me know. It's not just me, right? And don't forget, please to hit like and subscribe for more retro game reviews. Honestly, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.